what I wanted to start off by asking you is, why are you so passionate about keeping the UK together?
Well, I hate countries breaking up. Unless there's an overwhelming need to do so, it's far better that countries should stay together. I particularly hate it when a false argument is being advanced that the country that seeks to break away is somehow oppressed or occupied. Nothing could be further from the truth. Scotland is not a colony of England. Scotland and England together colonised most of the world. Far from being an imperial possession of England, we were partners in crime in the British Empire. And so for it now to be advanced that we want to be free leads me to ask, free from what exactly? What is specific about your lack of freedoms here rather than there, just across the currently non-existing border? And the answer to that is nothing. There is no national oppression of the Scottish people. If there were, this would be a different question. And thirdly, I hate the idea that people advance the case for separation on the basis that we'll be richer as a result. Because, of course, we could only be richer if somebody else was poorer. And if that somebody else is currently a citizen of the same state as us, that seems to me a thoroughly immoral proposition. Now, I represent the actual poorest people in Britain. We're at the top of every league you'd want to be at the bottom of, and at the bottom of every league you'd want to be at the top of. Trust me, there is nowhere in Scotland as poor as the people that I represent. But they'll be abandoned forever to perpetual Tory government. Just do the arithmetic. And will never get out of the pit that classical endogenous growth syndrome, as Gordon Brown's man Ed Balls might once have put it. If they're stuck in neocon economic territory in perpetuity, they will sink. So for all these reasons, I think this is a thoroughly dishonest, false dichotomy which Scottish nationalism has always been trying to advance. And they have advanced it, by the way, through thick and thin. They advanced it before oil was ever discovered. I forget now what we were going to live on then, shortbread exports or the Alexander Brothers record sales. I forget now, it's so long ago. But they were advancing the case for separation, even when the enemy was at the gates, at the Channel ports, and threatening to invade and occupy us. The leaders of the SNP were openly willing a Nazi invasion, and some of them were arrested and some were interned for that very purpose. I commend a book called Fascist Scotland to you in that regard. So it didn't matter what situation Britain was in, the Scottish nationalists were trying to subvert it, and I just hate that.
Yeah. And there seems to be so much negativity that's been stirred up. Basically, they're saying you can't be a patriotic Scot if you're not for an independent Scotland. Basically, we should be strong, we can be independent, we can survive on our own. How would you deal with that sort of mentality?
Well, my friends dealt with it at our historic meeting in the Usher Hall tonight, and they're better at dealing with it than I, because I tell you the truth, I'm not a big fan of patriotism. It's, as Dr. Johnson said, usually the last refuge of the scoundrel. I am only interested in what people believe in, what their faith is, what they stand for, what their values are, wherever they live in the world. For me, it's an accident that I was born on the same piece of rock as the bigoted, billionaire, homophobe Brian Suter, who's funding much of this campaign. I have nothing in common with him.
And there's been so much division created that irrespective of which way the vote goes on the 18th, there is going to be a massive fallout. Families have been torn apart, communities have been torn apart. Irrespective of what happens on the 18th, how do you heal that rift?
It's a very troubling aspect of all of this. They keep saying that it's a civilized civic nationalism that they stand for. but it doesn't feel very civic or civilized to me. Certainly not if you viewed my Twitter feed, which is XXX certificate. So it's a serious problem that on top of the other divisions that we have in our society here in Scotland, we have now overlaid another, where one side calls the other side, even though we are the majority, I think, quislings and traitors, which of course by definition cannot be true. You cannot be in the majority and be a traitor. Traitor to what? But I grew up in this country as an Irish Catholic. My grandparents came here as immigrants in their bare feet. And they faced 100 years, actually, of discrimination and bigotry, some of which still exists today. You can ask Neil Lennon, the former Celtic manager, about that.
Yeah.
Now that's a division we need to solve. That's a scar that needs to heal. To open a new scar and a new division on top of that, as well as other divisions that exist between North and South, between the mainland and the islands, between the post-industrial areas and the booming financial sector areas, one of which we're sitting in now. These are real divisions that we need to work hard to resolve and bring together. And to add this new, are you Scottish or are you British, is a very, very backward step.
And finally, if you had minutes to convince an undecided voter at this point, what would you say to them?
Well, if I was appealing to their well-known Scottish sense of money, because we're famously quite, we call it canny,
Yeah.
but that really means tight. We know the value of money. We know how hard it is to come by, how easy it is to lose, and how it has to be husbanded properly. If I was appealing to you on that level, I'd say this, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart. Separation will spark a race to the bottom of low regulation, low taxation, low public services, low public expenditure, economies on both sides of the border, which would then have to be a real border because of the different immigration policies in both parts of the island. Working people have nothing to gain. Rupert Murdoch does. Brian Souter does. Jim McCall from his Monaco tax exile does. But the working people have nothing to gain from that. It can only depress the quality of life in both parts of the island. If I was appealing to your better nature, I'd say this, that cutting off people that we've been together with, marrying amongst, living and working amongst, fighting amongst, defending the country for a time alone against Hitler fascism. Nobody asked who was the pilot that was flying overhead in the summer of 1940, defending this small island from the fascist hordes. Nobody asked whether the pilot came from Suffolk or from Sutherland or which accent he spoke in. It would be a crime in the second decade of the 21st century to erect a border, a barrier, an obstacle between people who've lived together for so long.